Let's go now to the people's poll. David Burrell, our polling partner at Wick, joins us. David, thank you. This poll is special in some ways and unique in others. Here's why it's special. Big sample, 1,000 people. You see a lot of polls that are 500 people, 300 people. Done quickly because of David's methodology, which we'll talk about in a second. But what makes it unique is it's the people's poll. It's the poll of this community. 15 of you got to submit questions. Probably in the case of, I guess, all of you, maybe one or two not. First time you ever got to write a poll question. And so David's going to run through. He'll highlight ones that came from the community. Sean and Dan and I also got to submit questions. And the idea is we can do this on a basis where we as a community can sample public opinion, and we can ask about what we want to ask about. And because David's methodology allows polls to be turned relatively quickly, we can be on the news together and sample public opinion that way. So, David, so grateful as always to partner with you. First, tell people about the basic methodology. How many people do you survey? How do you do your polls? And what's are your polls fake or partisan? That's a softball.
No, our polls are not partisan. We've done polling for a lot of nonprofits on both sides for a long time. But this poll was, one of the funnest we've ever done because it's the first time I've also been able to get questions from just regular voters, regular Americans, the two-way community, as well as some great questions from the two-way team. So as Mark said, it's 1,000 completes, and there's a lot of different ways our company does polling. Some of it's probability polling, where you're randomly calling people or randomly texting people. You've all probably gotten some of those texts, whether you like them or not. And also, but there's another types of polling that are through panels, which are panels of people who have opted in to take polls. And a lot of the polls you see online are done through this. And the advantage of them is two things. One is we can turn them around very fast because the people who are taking the polls are actually incentivized and paid to. And secondly, is we can ask a lot of questions. And like Mark said, that allowed us to get over 15 questions from the two-way community, questions from the two-way team, a lot of those questions that you're going to see here in the presentation.
Okay, Dave, thank you for that. And again, so grateful to you and your team, Peyton and the others at Wick. Go ahead and roll the deck, and Sean and Dan will jump in when they want to add in or ask questions.
So first 100 days in, I want to start with favorability. So this isn't too far off from what you've probably seen in a lot of polls. Trump is slightly underwater, Vance is tracking with him, and Musk is very unpopular. Interestingly, the most popular person that we measured, which actually came from a two-way community member as well, was Zelensky, more popular than any Republican institution, Democratic institution, or key figure.
David, look at that Bernie Sanders was at +6. That's interesting. And AOC -5. And I mean, yep.
Yeah, and please do stop me at any time as we're going through. But that's true. I will note on Bernie being higher is interesting also. His issue is his ceiling is, you see that 41% favorability. His issue is he can't get his ceiling too much higher than that.
Yep.
But it does look good in a net favorability.
Yeah, I will say, especially on the Zelensky thing, that the thing that's always sticks out to me is it's a plus favorability, but he's also highly, no opinion or unknown. So it's sort of like among the people who answered.
Yeah. And Mark, can you confirm that everyone's seeing the slides?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
We're all in rapture.
All right, awesome. Well, moving on, this is a little bit similar, but somewhat different. We asked job performance, which is different than favorability, and as well as job performance on certain issues. You'll notice here that the job performance is a -8 overall, which again, his favorability was a -3. So you're seeing that even some people have a favorable opinion of Donald Trump are not approving of his performance so far. As you can see, the high is on security and immigration, whereas the low is clearly on economy. We got a question in from Dean from the two-way community, very in theme with the first 100 days, that wanted to ask, which of the below do you think is the biggest accomplishment in the first 100 days of the Donald Trump administration? Very similar to what you're seeing in the job approval. It was, centered on immigration, with reducing border crossings is #1, with deportation of illegal immigrants is #2. And of course, there's always that 30% that said he did not have any accomplishment. I will point out here, though, that there's not a lot of high numbers for trade or economy, which is going to be thematic as we kind of keep going through here.
Well, and it also explains why they keep going back to immigration when they hit bumps in the road.
Yeah, all right. And for better or worse, and this is always interesting, and right when a president takes office, it's his economy. But you're seeing here in the numbers, the percentage of people who say this is Trump's economy now, even only 100 days in, and these numbers probably would have been held true even a month or so ago. As soon as the president take office, they don't get a lot of time for their economic agenda to earn credibility. And lastly on this, we also asked, just generally speaking, with the first 100 days, would you give Trump, what job performance would you give? Or grade would you give him on his job performance? And I highlighted a couple of numbers here on the right rather, that I think are a little bit telling. And that's that only 20% said A or B of independents, whereas 60% of independents said D or F. And I think those are the worrisome numbers for Trump when I look at the first 100 days. I won't stop there. Dan, Sean, do you want me to go back on anything? I'm going to tariffs next.
No, I mean, when I look at that one, the party breakdown, it's interesting because you always hear like 92% of Republicans support Trump. They're strong with Trump. The base is strong. And when you see that, it's like, okay, half of it is super strong in the A category, but the B, C, like that says there's a little bit of concern.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we'll kind of come back to this maybe a little bit as we get into the tariff section too, because I think it's kind of some interesting things there. All right, so next section here, tariffs. Dan, one of your questions was in here as well. So we start off with actually Sean's question. Really wanted to break down the different purposes of tariffs, the potential purposes of tariffs, and see where people's favorability on it was. And I think this is interesting, and this can be thematic throughout the rest of this section. And that's that when asked if they were support opposed to use to create a level playing field for U.S. companies, plus 24%, to incentivize U.S. manufacturing, plus 20%, and to reduce the federal deficit, plus 12%. So, despite some of the negative ramifications for Trump's image, I think, of the tariffs as they're being implemented now and as they're shaking out, they are not, we have a typo on that page, but they are certainly not unpopular as a potential means as an economic tool. And this is from Batya on tariffs on the 2A team. She asked.
Hey, David, I apologize, but if you go back no, you don't need to go back, but at some point, what I would love to know is how much overlap there is among the three things, meaning some folks that I've talked to said part of the reason that the Trump administration speaks to all three of those messages is that some people believe that deficit tariffs are good. I'd love to know, again, we don't need to obviously do it now, but at some point, like how much overlap is there? Because to me, I still believe that first one, the level playing one that President Trump has talked about for decades, is clearly, and it's indicated in the polling, is the strongest one. The pushback you get from a lot of people is, yeah, but the people who think the deficit and the people who think onshoring don't necessarily share the first view, so that you're trying to hit all three audiences. So I'm intrigued by the question.
Yeah, I like that question too. And I know my team's listening to the show right now, so we'll make some notes and get that answer out. So y'all can all share it via email and even on your other shows. But yeah, so my team will get on that and we'll actually get that answer. I'm interested in that one too. Similarly on the kind of purpose of tariffs and where people are generally speaking on them, which statement best reflects your view of the economic impacts? Tariffs are generally beneficial because they protect the American industries and workers, 21%. Tariffs can be useful in specific situations, but must be used with caution at 35%. And then just 33% saying tariffs are generally harmful because they raise the cost and reduce U.S. competitiveness. And again, this was another 218 question. And you are seeing a major class or at least income split in this crosstab over here of the.
I think it's interesting that 100,000 to 250 is the highest in beneficial. I wonder if that's kind of white collar jobs beginning to morph overseas in services.
I think so too. I would love to get Batya's opinion on it too, because I know she had some underlying thoughts and hypothesis on this of why she even asked the question in the first place. So maybe we'll get that. Moving on, we have two more. I like this one as well. This is thinking about short-term and long-term outcomes. Which one of these you most agree with? Think most likely to occur: short-term pain but long-term gain. That went out at 53%, whether short-term pain and long-term pain at 47%. And I think the party splits are very interesting here as well. I'll stay on there for a second for y'all to see it. And then moving on to the last question on the tariffs, and this is from Dan. I think we're kind of seeing something here across a lot of slides that despite how tariffs are shaking out now and maybe some of the displeasure, there is, generally speaking, registered voters in America are not completely against tariffs. And, even Harris voters from 2024, only 45% said they're not willing to give them any chance. So I thought this was a great question.
What I love about this is, and this is what I've said and what the Frank Luntz focus group revealed the other day, is that the media will doom and gloom all this stuff. And this gets back to this idea that Trump has been talking about it. The American people knew. Dan, I think Dan brings up, he never was specific about the quote pain that would cause economically, but people are, I think, aware of what he's trying to do and the significance of bringing back. And I think that this answer reveals that they're willing to give Trump the leash to do what's in the long-term interest of the country.
Well, and I think the challenge is for them, I agree with you, Sean, that people are, and I think most of the country is rooting for Trump to be successful. Challenge they're going to keep having is executives have to plan and forecast. And that is so, like, you're going to keep getting bad headlines because they're speaking the truth, right? Like, we don't know. We're having to lay people off. We're unsure. And then people are like, God, I kind of hope he's successful, but I'm nervous.
No, Dan, I think both y'all nailed it. And this is, and the data in these slides is pretty much saying exactly that.
Yeah. It's why it's a pickle for Democrats for tariffs. They're not just saying 100% hell no. And that's an opening for Trump.
Right. I do think it's going to be very interesting to see if some of these trade deals do get announced, how that is going to impact public opinion on the general opinion on the economy, as well as Trump performing on tariffs as well. Like you're saying, they're not against it necessarily.
Yep.
Okay, great. So now a little bit of a rapid fire. We have more questions in this. I just don't have time to do the slides. And please definitely stop me again, Mark and Sean and Dan, anytime you want to go through it. But otherwise, I'm going to kind of move through relatively quickly, just so we make sure everyone's gets seen. Got a great question from another Dan, a different Dan from the two-way community on due process.
Smart Dan, not this Dan. Yep.
Yes. And it said, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution declares that no person shall be, deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Should non-citizens who are in the country illegally be entitled to due process protections, specifically protections that might limit or delay their deportation? I love this question. It's actually a really well-written public opinion question, as opposed to saying, hey, this MS-13 criminal, do you think that he should still be in the country? This is a good question. You see that America is very evenly split on it. And that also, even if you look at the party crosstabs, I think they're very interesting as well, because it's not as polarizing as you might think from just the GOP saying no.
And that's why I think it's so important, because our first instinct was that the Garcia stuff was a slam dunk for Trump. And I've said this for the last few weeks. It's not. Like, it is. I find this remarkable that it's split, because people have said the due process stuff is wimpy and weak and it's terrible. Doesn't appear to be a losing argument.
Yeah, but there's a difference. And this is, again, I mean, to David's point, how this is asked matters. This says generic person A, You start saying a gangbanger that's wife's accused him of the following that did the following.
But there's no poll that supports that, Sean, because
well, here's the deal. Common sense tells me if a blank individual with no rap sheet, 56% of Republicans and 41% of independents think that the generic good guy should go, then bad guy definitely goes.
There's also another element to this as well. That is, we had to add in a bit of a definition of what due process is and Fifth Amendment. And so, when you do layer and Dan, this may have padded the numbers a little for, I guess, the Democrats, if you want to put it that way.
I mean, the only thing is almost every public poll has said 50% think he should come back, and 30% think he should stay. Again, I think it's bad for Democrats, but it's not a winner for Trump. That's the point I want to make.
This is a great question. And again, I want to keep. I know people are here to get the analysis. That's why we're talking through it. But I just want to make sure we get through some. So I'm going to move to the next one. This is a great one from Steve in the two-way community. The question was basically, which statement do you agree with more regarding RFK Jr.'s proposal to remove soft drinks like Coke and Pepsi from SNAP? And again, another great question. The proposal is a good idea because they're generally unhealthy and should never have been covered by taxpayer money in the first place, or it's a bad idea, targets low income minority communities, and there's racial discrimination. So as you can see, across the board, especially with GOP and independents.
Yeah, you know what I'll say again. I love this question. Kudos to Stephen. Is that who asked it? But I will say the interesting thing is I think from that plays to the to one angle of the no. I think there's also some conservatives that believe that it's a choice issue, that like you shouldn't. I mean, anyway, I think this is great news for the Maha world. And for RFK and Sarah Sanders and Brooke Rollins, who are really focused on the SNAP piece of this. But this just shows you, I mean, you look at this thing, it's a huge winner with the Republicans, good with the independents, and not bad with Democrats.
Yeah, Dan, I'll say, I'm sorry, Sean, I'll say two things on this again. One is that I like this question because it's not a strict public opinion question where you go out there and say, oh, this is exactly where America is on SNAP, but you're giving people's real viewpoints. You're saying between viewpoint 1 and viewpoint 2, which do you align with more, which is a different type of insight. And I think, like you said, it does bode well, but there are other angles. And I'll tell you, one of the questions we even ask, which might not surprise anyone here, is we ask vaccination status. And to Sean's point, in the crosstab, you would think, well, certainly the people who aren't vaccinated are going to think this is, a really good idea because they're, with RFK and, and they're, about health or, in their opinions. But no, they're about personal decisions, right? And so actually they were very evenly, people who are not vaccinated were very evenly split on this, the people who were not vaccinated. I'm going to say so.
It's funny, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, David, but this just for food for thought for the next time. One of the things that's really fascinating that I'm intrigued on in this area is that there's a lot of people when Kennedy talks about banning dyes and all this kind of stuff, and everyone assumes that it goes over. There's I think a strong thread within the conservative movement that says, I don't necessarily want to ban them, but I want transparency. I want the government to tell me what's in these things. I'll make the decision as a consumer. You don't need to tell me what I can and can't have. I just don't want to be, I don't want to be gaslit. I don't want to be lied to. I want to know what's in these products. I am smart enough to make my own decisions. And I think that there's a line in Maha world between banning things and telling me what's in them, and I'll make the right choice as a consumer. And and obviously I'm just saying that I think that this whole area is fascinating in terms of public opinion because I think that there are different threads within it.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna keep going. So this one's from Terry Ann on court challenges. I thought this was not good for Trump, but pretty much which of these statements do you agree with more, even if neither is exactly right? Regarding the large number of court challenges against the Trump administration, and what you're seeing here is they showed the Trump administration has pursued a large number of unconstitutional policies at 48%, whereas the bias and significant bias in the judicial system being at 35%. Again, a major, I think that's a major problem for Trump as he moves forward in this. Moving on, please do stop me again if I need to. I just want to make sure I can get through this. So do you think that the mainstream media has covered Trump fairly? How do you think they covered Trump's administration the first 100 days? So 62% said it's been fair so far. Everyone look at those crosstabs.
Super interesting question. And I'm a little surprised that only 23 of Republicans said very unfair.
Yeah.
Me too. Yes, me as well. So, but
I mean, as many, according to the poll, as many said very fair as very unfair.
I know.
It probably depends, Mark, on where you're getting your news, right?
Yeah. And also, of course, maybe even despite the tensions, the fact that people are being allowed in to see the president. Jeffrey Goldberg on Morning Joe this morning said, I was allowed in to see Donald Trump. Joe said to him, would Joe Biden have let you in like that? And he scoffed at it. Said, of course not. I didn't have that kind of access. So,
by the way, to your follow-up, Dean in the chat is asking this. I think next time we really should delve down on where people are getting their news, because I think that's significant. And I also think the one thing that's interesting to me that I've learned is we traditionally talk about Republicans and Democrats. And I think there's still a split in the Republican Party between Donald Trump supporters, MAGA supporters, MAGA people, and mainstream Republicans. Because I think that there's a lot of people on the Republican traditional party who might think one thing, who necessarily aren't hardcore Trump supporters that don't share the view.
Absolutely. 100%.
I
Great
think the
point.
next question may be a similar topic as well. No, okay, there's another one on the media as well here in a minute, but we'll get there in a second. Okay, so which of these statements do you agree with more, even if neither is exactly right? And this was a fun question from Jason. Trump believes both China and Russia are adversaries of the United States. He believes China is, but Russia is not. Russia is, but China is not, or that neither of them are adversaries. So you can see 27% saying he believes both of them are adversaries. I don't know what to take from this. Y'all might have more thoughts than I do. I think it's an interesting question, though, so I'm glad we got it. I would not have asked it.
It's just fascinating as we talk about Ukraine and tariffs and yep.
Okay, this is a fun one too. So this is how many, thinking about your closest friends who are not family members, how many of them belong to the opposite party as you?
Whoa.
And you can see none at 30%, 1 to 2. Again, another question I would that probably never would have existed if it weren't for the people's poll, because
That is great.
Pollsters don't think that, and politicians, and we don't think to ask it. It's a fun one though. And again, this will get shared afterwards. So if there's an interesting insight, stop me, but I'm going to keep going.
Yep. Keep going.
Okay. This is another good one. Do you agree or disagree that I believe most Americans share the same core values? We did age here instead of party, but well, party one. Okay, to what extent do you believe the congressional Democrats have lost their credibility for their role in covering up Joe Biden's physical and mental decline? I do think that 41% is not a good number on the Dem side, and the 12%, the Democrats got some issues.
That's a great question, Mary Beth.
Yeah.
Really interesting. I haven't seen that
Sure
anywhere.
is.
Super interesting.
By the way, it's the Dems. Look, they can. I think that it's actually. I'm surprised that it's as high as it is among Dem voters. Their big concern should be that independent number.
Yep. 100%.
By the
All
way,
right,
the audience questions are winning over our questions big time.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
I'll say this: we got some really good ones we didn't get to include, and including some that came in late that were just really fun and funny, and so we're gonna have a great one on the next time. Okay, we got a couple questions on the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So both of them were asked the same way. Well, John asked one of them, we added the other. But if Russia refuses to engage in good faith negotiations for a lasting peace with Ukraine or undermines the sovereignty of Ukraine after peace is negotiated, do you support increasing sanctions against Russia? Okay, obviously you're seeing a lot of support for increasing sanctions against Russia. So the same question, but asking if you support increasing or what level of financial support the United States provide to Ukraine. Obviously, you're seeing only 23% saying increase or significant increase. And again, this is contingent on Russia refusing good faith negotiations and so forth. So, obviously, if you were to compare this to 2 years ago, it would be, dramatically different where, everyone, the majority of people would be saying increased support. So it's been a big shift in public opinion on financial support to Ukraine. So another good question.
Go ahead, Mark and Sean. You can say it. You guys were right. I was wrong.
There you
go. Okay, we have more. We'll put out the full results. That's the ones from the two-way community. We do have a couple more from the two-way team, Mark, but I don't know. We've spent a good amount of time. You tell me if you want to.
Well, just to say, I only submitted one question, and David and I want to make it clear to everybody that these don't have to be questions just about politics, right? It's a great time to sample public opinion on anything. So just show mine. Again, you'll get all these questions, but just so you know, I purposely didn't do a political question, even though I had plenty. Sean and Dan and Pacha and others covered it. But just go to mine. I think it's the next one. Who's of these four musical acts? Who are the GOAT? The Beatles, Taylor Swift, Elvis Presley, and Beyonce. And although, thank goodness, the Beatles won because it's the obvious answer, they didn't win by a lot over the King and Taylor. So again, want to make that point for the.
You didn't ask one person involved in yacht rock. I would have put Christopher Cross or Michael McDonald in there.
They would have gotten it. Don't know.
I would not have put Elvis as most popular amongst his fans at 18 to 34-year-olds. That is interesting.
There you go.
Not even the Grateful Dead. I mean, there was a lot that got overlooked in there.
Three things
Rolling
I want to
Stones.
I know we've limited ourselves to 4. I almost put the Stones in, but I wanted a little diversity of chronology. Anyway, 3 things I want to say besides thanks to David and Peyton and the other
Yeah,
folks at
nice
Wick and
job.
how great we are. How great they were. Number one, I'm so excited that you all got to see Sean and Dan colloquiing with David, because that's the kind of discussion that people have in political organizations and news organizations when they run through a new poll. Probably most of you have never seen it. We've all got to have that experience of the kind of back and forth, asking questions, making points. I'm glad you got to see that. And again, that'll be part of this. Second, so excited to have the First People's Poll. And I hope those of you who submitted questions that were used are super excited to be part of it, and glad that we had you part of it. In the future, we're going to make sure you're fine with, if you'd like us to identify you by first, last name, and hometown, we're happy to give you even more credit. We just went with first names this time. And then lastly, as we do more, I've already apologized for getting the email address wrong in my Substack. As we do more, we'll welcome your submissions. And we got a ton, and I suspect after today, we'll get even more. David, thank you. Hey, want to be part of the two-way community all the time? Hit the subscribe button. Great video clips like this, plus conversations like no other, full episodes, and more, always available on this channel. You got to hit subscribe to never miss a thing.